All right, some new details on Trump's nomination, some good and some bad news. We lost his DEA pick yesterday, and now we could be about to lose another. Pete Hegseth, Trump's new Secretary of Defense. Why is this happening? And who might replace him? Also, Tucker Carlson's back in Moscow. Why is he there? Because the U.S. State Department blocked his attempt to interview President Zelensky. Crazy story. Also, we're still following the Daniel Penny trial and some new shocking video, newly unearthed video from the lead prosecutor in the case. We're going to watch this clip together and then tell me if you'd be comfortable with this lady prosecuting you. I sure as hell wouldn't be. And some more devastating news for Fani Willis down in Fulton County, Georgia. Big Fanny's in some hot water down there. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps out the channel. And consider subscribing so you don't miss these regular updates. So President-elect Trump is in the best possible position he could be going into his second term. The permanent bureaucracy obviously still despises him, just like they despise all of us. But he's got the majority popular support in this country. He's the most popular politician in decades, and longtime Trump supporters can feel it. If you've supported Trump since he came down the escalator back in 2015, you know what I'm talking about. There's something different about today. It's clear there's a different momentum in the air, and the resistance is muted. But it doesn't mean they won't be trying. Last night, the Swamp scored a major victory with the Trump team capitulating to FBI background checks. Why'd they do that? Originally, they passed on this offer saying that they were going to use private vetting instead. Well, they were pressured into it yesterday. Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Lindsey Graham told the Trump team they must see an FBI background check in order to begin considering his more controversial nominees. You can believe Trump is definitely pissed off about this. He really doesn't trust the FBI. Obviously, he was burned by them over and over again, but he's really got no choice here. The Republicans at 53 senators, that means Trump can only lose 3 votes, giving each of these rhinos a tremendous amount of power that they wouldn't otherwise have. And these rhino senators are using that power right now on Trump's nominations, one in particular, Pete Hegseth. And the rumor mill in D.C. was flying yesterday that Pete is out. He won't be confirmed. They've been trying this soft power coup to push him out up until yesterday, meeting with Hegseth and privately warning him, saying things like, this process won't be easy. It's going to be very difficult. Are you sure you want to be doing this? Are you sure you want to go through this? You want to put your family through this? Do you really want to do that? You really want to dredge up this past, hoping that'd be enough to get him to withdraw his nomination, but he didn't. He wants to fight.
Have you had any conversations with the president-elect about replacing you with Governor DeSantis?
I spoke to the president-elect this morning. He said, keep going, keep fighting. Behind you all the way.
So you're in this all the way.
Why would I back down? I've always been a fighter. I'm here for more fighters. This is personal, passionate for me.
So you're not withdrawing your name from consideration, just to be clear.
I'm meeting all day with senators.
I know your mom was just on Fox. She says that you are a change.
And you can tell he wants to fight because his mother came out this morning to defend her son and explain the emails that she sent 7 years ago about these assault allegations. Here's what she said this morning. Watch this.
It was a difficult time. I want to say something about the media. And part of today is to discredit the media and how they operate. When they contact you, I let a few phone calls go, but then they call you and say they threaten you. That's the first thing they do. Right. They say, unless you make a statement, we will publish it as is. And I think that's a despicable way to treat anyone. Threats are dangerous, and they're hard on families.
So to recap, you were angry about what was going on, his behavior during the divorce.
Right.
And so you wrote that email. And then, a couple hours later, you apologized. And you
For
guys
some of the
talked
words,
and you
yes.
worked it out?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Pete and I are very close today. In fact, our whole family is very tight-knit.
But look, he's running out of time. He needs to flip some of these no votes to yeses. According to the Wall Street Journal, Trump's now considering replacing Hegseth with Governor Ron DeSantis. Is that true? I have no idea, but I'm sure Trump is lining up some backup options because, get this, after Trump signed off on these FBI background checks yesterday, 6 of these Rhino senators said they still wouldn't confirm Hegseth, even with the background checks clearing him. They're the ones who pressured Trump into doing it in the first place. You gotta wonder why. These people are snakes. Most of all, Lindsey Graham, who's leading the effort behind the scenes to kill the Hegseth nomination. In another story, Tucker Carlson is back in Moscow meeting and interviewing the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, to get Russia's perspective on how close we really are to nuclear war, to a world war. What is Russia really thinking right now after Joe Biden authorized and began launching missiles with Ukraine into Russian sovereign territory? Remember, these missiles that Biden authorized 2 weeks ago, Ukraine can't fire them. U.S. and NATO personnel are the ones who have to actually program the missiles with the coordinates that the Ukrainians provide to us, where to send them into Russia, deep inside Russia. Nobody in American media has thought it was a good idea to ask the Russians, what do you think about the U.S. doing this? How much of an escalation is this really? Are you planning on retaliating against the United States? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not a single interview or question from Western media about this. They're just all taking their marching orders from the U.S. State Department, acting as their personal stenographers. And for the record, Tucker tried to meet with the Ukrainian president as well, but he couldn't. And get this, why couldn't he? Because our State Department, led by Antony Blinken, ordered the Ukrainians not to speak with Tucker. Zelensky apparently wanted to. His people spoke with Tucker's people, but in the end, the Americans gave Zelensky the stand-down order, and he complied. Watch.
In the week since we left Russia, Moscow, where we are now, in February, after interviewing Vladimir Putin, we've watched from the United States as the Biden administration has driven the U.S. ever closer to a nuclear conflict with Russia, the country that possesses the world's largest nuclear arsenal. It has accelerated ever since, and it's reached its apogee so far in the weeks after Trump's election. He is now the president-elect. In that time, just a few weeks ago, the Biden administration, American military personnel, launched missiles into mainland Russia and killed at least a dozen Russian soldiers. So we are, unbeknownst to most Americans, in a hot war with Russia, an undeclared war, a war you did not vote for and that most Americans don't want, but that is ongoing. And because of that war, because of the fact that the U.S. military is killing Russians in Russia right now, we are closer to nuclear war than at any time in history. Far closer than we were during the Cuban Missile Crisis. That would mean the elimination of Russia, the United States, and most of the rest of the world. We felt there must be someone behind the scenes in Washington working to make sure that this conflict doesn't become a nuclear holocaust. But we found out that no, in fact, there is nobody. Tony Blinken, the current Secretary of State, cut off all contact between the U.S. and Russian governments. There is no back channel, there is no conversation, and there hasn't been for more than 2 years. That's shocking. Meanwhile, most Americans have no access to any perspective other than that granted to them by NBC News and the New York Times. They don't know how close we are. They don't know the Russian perspective. We've been trying for over a year to get that perspective out to American news consumers. We've also tried for over a year to get an interview with Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. We've attacked that from a bunch of different angles. We've spoken to a lot of different people around him, had dinner with them. We've been in talks continuously, and those efforts have been thwarted by the U.S. government. The American embassy in Kiev, which our tax dollars pay for, told the Zelensky government, no, you may not do the interview. You can talk to CNN, you can't talk to us. So we've been unable to speak to him. So we came back to Moscow yesterday to interview the foreign minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, the longest serving foreign minister in the world. He's been a part of this government for 25 years. He's been in the diplomatic corps for over 40. And ask him, where exactly are we? Are we headed toward an unprecedented conflict between Russia and the United States? Is there any way to peel Russia back from the east, from the sphere of China, back into the west? Is that alliance permanent? And does the election of Donald Trump mean an end to this war, which is reshaping the world, the U.S. economy, the global economy, and risking the life of every person on this planet? Is that possible? We just walked out of that interview. It's absolutely fascinating. It's coming very soon. We hope you'll watch.
And look, this is a good thing. Hearing the point of view, the perspective of your adversary is a good thing, not a bad thing, especially if it's done in good faith, which in this case, I believe it is. Whether you agree or not with what they have to say, why shouldn't we be allowed to hear this? We aren't in North Korea, folks. I'm an American. If they're spitting propaganda, I'll figure it out. But at the moment, the only propaganda I'm hearing is coming from the U.S. government. In another story, the jury in the Daniel Penny case is deliberating today. Let's hope it's a quick not guilty verdict. We showed what the lead prosecutor in the case told jurors yesterday in her closing arguments, painting Penny as this bad guy because he called Neely a crackhead. And look, calling a crackhead isn't something that makes you a bad person. Daniel Penny isn't a bad guy. He did something brave, put himself in danger to defend innocent passengers on that Manhattan subway last year. In any other state, this would be cut and dry self-defense. But of course, this is Manhattan. The DA is Alvin Bragg. You know the kind of man he is. What he did to Donald Trump. Well, the woman he has prosecuting this case is even worse than him. New video just surfaced of her admitting on video to giving preferential treatment to marginalized criminals. Watch this.
So I'm going to give you an example of something that I did with a recent case of mine, and this has never been done in my office. I had a murder case where the defendant did not intentionally kill the victim. He went into an ATM on the Upper West Side and tried to rob an individual. Unfortunately, it was an older individual. He was 86. And in the course of the robbery, he fell to the ground. And as a result, he died. This is, under the law, a felony murder, which is akin to intentional murder. However, when I first got the case, I took the time to learn about the defendant. And it was a strong case, so it wasn't about a whodunit. I knew immediately who did it. I could prove it. I could take it to trial that day and win it. But it wasn't about that. It was that the more I learned about the defendant and his life and the circumstances, the kinds of things that Jarrell was talking about, that one should take into account the trauma of that individual, I really felt incredibly sorry for him that he had gotten to that point in his life where he felt like there was no other choice but to commit this robbery.
Fani Willis, DA in Fulton County, Georgia, is finding herself in hot water after she's been ordered by a local judge to release all evidence and communication between Special Counsel Jack Smith and the J6 committee and her office regarding President Donald Trump. Anything pertaining to Trump or his allies must be turned over, is what the judge says, after she was found to have violated federal law, illegally withholding all of this, and violating state law, Georgia's open records law. This is what the court wrote yesterday. The court also hereby orders defendant to conduct a diligent search of her records for responsive materials within 5 business days of the entry of this order. Within that same 5-day period, defendant's ordered to provide plaintiff with copies of all responsive records that are not legally exempted or accepted from disclosure. This is the DA who led the charge in going after Donald Trump, the person who arrested him, fingerprinted him, took his mugshot, and released it to the press, all for partisan politics. Her case against Trump obviously has since fallen apart after the court learned that she was having a romantic affair with her then special prosecutor. Here's Tom Fitton explaining how screwed Fani is. Watch this.
I'm not aware ever in Judicial Watch's history of filing hundreds of open records and FOIA lawsuits that a federal agency, a state agency, or a government official has never failed. I'm not aware of that ever happening, of a government official or agency ever not showing up in court. It just has never happened before. Now, they argue with us about whether they owe us documents. That's a different matter, and they litigate the issue. But to ignore the requirement that you show up and answer a lawsuit in court, it's never happened before. And it shows to me that Fani Willis is really desperate to hide something. Incredible. She's in default.
All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.